The year was 1987. It was March and I had just turned 8 years old. I was going to a party with my grandfather that I am sure was going to be terrible. It was at his coworker's place, and I was convinced it was going to be awful. We walked in and there were just what felt like hundreds of people gathered around John's big screen TV. It was one of those big projection ones, that weigh 7,000 pounds. I looked at the TV, and there was Macho Man Randy Savage fighting Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I was captivated. My mind was blown. It was the first time I'd ever seen pro wrestling, and I was instantaneously hooked. This is something I shared deeply with my grandfather, and an interest that I've passed on today to my son. What's going on, everybody? Jay here from Square Pegs. Today we're looking at my favorite games in the history of pro wrestling on a new series I'm calling Generation Gap. Basically what the idea is that I'm taking a look at a particular subject and grabbing its first appearance in Generation 3, because that's kind of where I started gaming, so around the NES, Master System, and that like. And then I'm going to go every generation up until today and let you know what my favorite game is from each of those generations. If you enjoy content like this, please be sure to subscribe down below. And now, let's take a look at the generation gap of pro wrestling. Alright, up first for me from Generation 3 is Tecmo World Wrestling for the NES. And this game is magnificent, and I have to thank John Riggs for me even taking the time to check this game out. When he did his Tecmo ranking video of every NES game, he put this game as an A, and it was something I never took the time to check out as a kid. And I really wish I had, because I would have eaten this up with a spoon. It is so good. First and foremost, you have a ton of characters to choose from, all of which are based on real-life pro wrestlers, though none of them are named that way. For example, in this match you see you have Akira Dragon facing El Tigre. Akira Dragon is based on Antonio Inoki, and El Tigre is based on legend Tiger Mask. It's just so cool to be able to play characters like this with such a deep combat mechanic for such a simple game, only having 2 buttons and the D-pad to work with. Beyond just the combat mechanics, though, is the immersion of the game. It looks really good for an NES game, and I love the inclusion of the commentator down below. He calls the action as you're playing, and while you can't really read it as you're going through because you're focused on the action in the ring, it adds a bit of realism to the game. This takes me back to hearing Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon on the WWF when I was a kid, and it's just something I kind of love. This game's great. Definitely the best NES pro wrestling game. Alright, so what happens when you take a character from Final Fight in Hagar and you expand on his background as a pro wrestler? You get Saturday Night Slam Masters. This game takes everything you know and love about the basic brawling combat mechanics of Final Fight and sticks it in an arena in the ring, leaving you locked in one-on-one with your opponent. All of the characters in the game are big and bold. They're just ridiculously over the top. And there's all kinds of really neat things tied in here. There's a character named Titanic Tim who used to be a tag team partner to Birdie from Street Fighter. You have Gunlock, who in the Street Fighter the movie arcade game was revealed to be Guile's brother. There's all kinds of crazy stuff in this game. Biff Slamkovich makes mention of Zangief. It's just kind of revels in its idiocy. Like, the game is just over the top and dumb. This isn't going to win any awards. It's not a deeply strategic game. It's a brawler masked as a wrestling game. You fight until your opponent's life meter runs out, and when you're done, you get the pin and the game is over. It's fun, it's simple, it's basic, and it's wonderful. I mentioned fairly briefly about my adoration of WWF No Mercy in my pickups video from a couple weeks ago, but I want to go a little bit more in depth with it here and tell you why this game is so important to me. So WWF No Mercy to me is my favorite wrestling game, full stop. Like, nothing else compares to it. I love the combat mechanics in it. I think Aki just really dove in to figure out what makes a compelling game. And this could have worked for anything, and it's proven that it does, because the Aki engine is successful for years to come beyond just the WCW and WWF games on the N64. You get Def Jam Fight for New York, for example, out of this, as well as another game coming up that utilizes this same engine with minor tweaks. It's so good, it's so compelling, and it's so deep that it just makes for a spectacular, wonderful game. And there's so many characters to choose from in this game. It was kind of mind-blowing to see that on a game like this, because previously on stuff like WCW NWO Revenge, you only had like 15 characters to choose from. And then there was the Create a Wrestler, where you could dive in and make anything that your mind imagined. With one of the deepest movesets, a massive, massive character vault where you were able to unlock things and apply them to whoever you wanted to. It just made this game so deep and just instantly replayable. Literally, between the three of us, Corey, Bob, and I, we've put in thousands of hours into this game. It is my favorite, it is the best, and it is still great 20 years after its initial release. Stepping into Generation 6, we move over to the PlayStation 2 for our first disc-based game, and that is Galactic Wrestling featuring Ultimate Muscle, our second entry on the board featuring the Aki engine that was so successful with WWF No Mercy. Simply put, Galactic Wrestling is magnificent because it takes that super strategic and in-depth engine that was applied to WWF No Mercy that's super realistic and just completely tips it on its head by making it over-the-top, cartoonish, and crazy because of the world of Ultimate Muscle. Gone are things like a simple side Russian leg sweep or the Walls of Jericho, and instead we get the Muscle Buster, which ended up becoming a real move in pro wrestling thanks to Samoa Joe, as well as the Great Wall Drop. This game is over the top and ridiculous, and while it doesn't have a deep creator wrestler like WWF No Mercy does, it did have the gacha machines where you were able to buy the different toys. Now, as an old school muscle collector from the 80s and someone who loved the re-release of the Muscle figures featuring the Ultimate Muscle characters from the new animated series in the early 2000s, this was so far up my alley it wasn't even funny. Every game you played, you earned coins, and all those coins can be put into the gacha machines to unlock the different toys to add them to your collection. If you have never played it, you need to check it out because this is an absolutely magnificent example of what the Aki engine is capable of doing, and it's one of the reasons I am so optimistic about the upcoming AEW wrestling game utilizing a version of this engine. Taking a step up now to the Nintendo Wii, and we are on WWE All-Stars. Now, there's a lot of WWE games that have been released, both by THQ and from 2K, and a lot of just the ones that are named after a year they're okay. They're not necessarily great. I think 2K19 was a very solid game, but not something that really kind of blew my mind. But what did was this game here in WWE All-Stars. This took the basics of the WWE 2K combat mechanics and just ramped them up to 11 and made things over the top and ridiculous, featuring characters that were just completely super deformed, but still true to who they were. I mean, this is the best shape some of these characters have ever been in. I'm looking at you, Hulk Hogan. But the game's a lot of fun. It's over the top. It's crazy. The stuff that happens where you're going off the ropes and being able to bounce all over the place and shoot people up into the air when you connect on an attack is just wonderful. It's definitely not a perfect game. I don't want to give that impression, but it's definitely one I have a lot of fun with. If every other game on this list is an action movie, Fire Pro Wrestling World on the PS4 from Generation 8 is the Oscar-winning, in-depth character study of what makes pro wrestling work. Fire Pro Wrestling is really a strategy game. Like, it masquerades as a wrestling game with like the deepest creator wrestler you've ever seen. Like, I'm going to show you a little bit of it here, but the actual in-game mechanics themselves are so just deep and just it's timing based and strategic. It's kind of crazy. The game, like, I want to be very clear, Fire Pro Wrestling isn't for everybody. There was a time when I didn't really care for the series because it just wasn't what I was looking for, but the older I've gotten, the more I've enjoyed it, and the more I get into it knowing what I'm getting into. Like, yeah, you're moving around and you're doing attacks and there's signature moves and things like that, but it's really just like this over-the-top timed version of paper, rock, scissors, making sure everything is working the way you want it to work, kind of in a weird way like Alex Kidd. It's a fantastic game though, featuring a magnificent roster of characters from New Japan Pro Wrestling, as well as the Women of Stardom for some Joshi wrestlers. The game is just deep and really, really well put together. Again, it's not for everybody. Some people won't enjoy it, but for me, Fire Pro Wrestling World is one of the best wrestling games ever made. And now we come to our latest release with Generation 9, and that is Retro Mania Wrestling for the Nintendo Switch. Now, if you ever played WrestleFest back in the early 90s, this is the official sequel to the game. This has one of the most unique rosters of characters I've ever seen in a wrestling game. Let's run through it real quick. You have Hawk and Animal of the Legion of Doom, the Universal Heartthrob Austin Idol, the BWO of Stevie Richards, the Blue Meanie, and Nova, Brian Myers, formerly known as Kurt Hawkins, Boom Boom, Colt Cabana, Jeff Cobb, Johnny Retro, you may know him better as John Morrison, or Johnny Mundo, or Johnny Impact, lots of other Johnnies, Matt Cardona, formerly known as Zack Ryder in the WWE, the National Treasure Nick Aldis, your current NWA World Champion, Nikita Koloff, the innovator of violence Tommy Dreamer, weighing in at over 3,000 pounds of heavy metal, Warhorse, and Zack Sabre Jr., with more DLC to come featuring James Storms, Mr. Hughes, and dashing Chris Bay. This game is wonderful. It has such a basic, simple, ready to pick up and play, easy to get into, but so difficult to master combat mechanic, and it looks incredible. I love this game. I had played WrestleFest back when I was a kid, and I hadn't played it in decades, and to get this and to fall right back into it, it feels like I didn't miss a beat, and it feels like they didn't miss a beat either. Retromania Wrestling is available, I believe, on every digital marketplace right now, and there's going to be a physical release eventually from Limited Run Games. It is magnificent. All right, my friends, there you have it. My favorite games in the history of pro wrestling, starting with the NES and going all the way to today with the Nintendo Switch. I hope there's something on there that you enjoy. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite pro wrestling video game is from any generation, and let me know if there's anything I missed that you think I should have caught up on. Also, let me know what you think about this concept as an idea. I've had some other ideas as well for Generation Gap, and one that really intrigues me is doing something with launch day games to let you know what my favorite launch day game is from each generation. I think there's some meat on that bone. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up down below. Lets me know you enjoy the content I'm creating. And if you've not already done so, like I said at the start of the video, please be sure to hit the subscribe button. And while you're there, ring the notification bell so you can stay up to date with everything we've got going on. I want to thank my Patreon supporters that you're seeing on screen right now. You guys are amazing and you are helping the channel grow every month, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. If you're in a position to help the channel grow, please do consider supporting us on Patreon or pick up some of our merch over on our TeePublic store. Links will be in the pinned comment down below. Until next time, guys, I've been Jay. I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me as we take a look at my favorite games throughout the history of pro wrestling, starting with Generation 3. Until next time, be sure to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.